campers, political junkies, theater and film sluts, and pervs of all ages, welcome to the World According to Yoni. As ever, I am your host, Yoni Martin. We have got a fun-packed show for you today, but before I get to our guest, I just want to say one thing. Congratulations to Kimberly Guilfoyle, former Fox News twit, current girlfriend of Donnie Twitler Jr., and the girl who is probably giving COVID-19 to most of the Trump re-election campaign staff. I just want to say, you honey, you're aces. Now that I've had my fun with Kimberly and Gavin Newsom, aren't you happy you got rid of her? It's time for our guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Rocky Mountain Mike. For those of you who don't know Mike, Mike is the man who creates parodies and little ditties for the guests on the Stephanie Miller Show, available on Sirius and Free Speech TV, some terrestrial stations. And if you don't know who Stephanie is, I have no idea why you're watching my show. In any event, Mike is somebody I've wanted to speak to for quite a while now because I love his parodies. He has been mocking the Twitler family, and before that, the Bush family and Cheney and all the right-wing twits for about, more than 10 years now. So, without further ado, I give you Rocky Mountain Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Yoni.
Glad to see you.
Good to see you, too. You're healthy and well.
Yes, and you called me great on Twitter, so I am very happy. I'm having a hell of a morning. Do you know how many more people responded to your calling me great and doing your little promo than have responded to my
promo? I'm just trying to put back good stuff into the universe.
And you are.
My sordid past.
So the first thing I want to talk about is your name, Rocky Mountain Mike. I mean, we all know, you've got a real name, and Mike Hardiman is who you are.
Right.
But you're not really Rocky Mountain. I mean, you grew up in Oklahoma, right?
Well, that's not far away, actually. But the thing about it is that my presence became known when I was living in Raleigh and sending my little bits in. And you know how listening to the Stephanie Miller Show, everybody is so-and-so from so-and-so.
Right.
It's never first and last name. So I was Mike in Raleigh, and then I moved from Raleigh to Eagle County, Colorado, near Vail, to take a job and start my life over again. And so I decided to be Rocky Mountain Mike from that point on. The job turned out to be the worst job I've ever had, and I've had some bad jobs, but it was they were pretty nasty there, and I only lasted 7 months. So I was only in the Rockies 7 months, but the name stuck. That's what everybody knew me as. So I wasn't going to change my name just because I moved.
It's a good name, actually. I like it.
So I'm back in North Carolina now. I went from Colorado back to Oklahoma. My mom was sick. My dad had died, and I kind of hung around in that part of the country for another 5 years before I moved back to North Carolina 2 years ago. And I'm since retired and bought a house and settled down in central North Carolina, and I'm not changing my name. I'm sorry.
And you have a wonderful recording studio there. Look at your instruments and.
Oh, well, this is actually the temporary setup. When I moved into the house, I spent most of my time on the home theater, and I kind of literally just sort of threw this together. This is sort of pre-existing stuff, but I'm going to tear all this out and build a proper studio with lighting and everything. So hopefully I can do like you and put together some video podcasts.
Well, when I was speaking to Jody last week, it was funny because she's in her basement where she does her podcast.
Right. And I felt like it was a requirement to have guitars on the wall when you do the Yoni Show.
Yeah, it was funny because I wanted, and I may put in the background of my stuff, but my guitars are over there, my bass, the acoustic.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
My
Sure.
drums are packed in a closet.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We're buying that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you're doing this. You're on Michigan Avenue, and this is just a backdrop. You're in front of the Hard Rock Cafe there.
Hey, listen, I'd rather use their background. They've got better stuff. But anyway, so ironic you were living when you were in the Rocky Mountains that you were in Vail, because you're not much of a skier, are you?
No, I mean, the thing is, I'm a photographer. I've been doing landscape photography for 30 years. And when I was living in Dallas and worked for American Airlines, I'd fly up to every place. I'd go to all the national parks and everything on the weekends. I mean, I would literally go to Yosemite for 2 hours and then come back home. And it was great. And I always looked forward to someday being able to live somewhere where I could actually just get in a car and go take my pictures. So when I found that ad for a job there, I did that. And, I knew that it wasn't a national park, it was a ski area, but I also didn't realize that the whole area is like you're either a millionaire or you're the help. There's not a lot of middle class people in that area.
And you are the help.
And it's kind of douchebag central. It really is. It's every bad stereotype. And I knew some people that were millionaires and retired that were stellar people. But for me, going to the Starbucks in the morning and knowing that every single person in this place doesn't have to work but me, it's kind of like demoralizing, I think.
Well, look, the work you're doing now is I don't know, you're retired, but you're making jingles, and you're doing your parodies, and which are wonderful. We're going to play one later in the show.
It's fun.
And you've got quite a following. You've got this Stephanie Miller Show following, which is really funny because I've been pilfering her guests.
Sorry, I was looking for my CD. I was going to hold it up, but I don't seem to have a copy here.
Wow, you've got a CD to promo and you didn't have it handy?
Hold it. Just hold it right there.
Okay. Like I'll talk while Mike's getting his CD to promo. I mean, who comes on a show with an audience, hopefully, and doesn't have the material?
I forgot what I did with them. I have a whole box of them, and I was going to... Sorry.
Well, you can send me one, because I like to listen to your stuff.
Actually, I think I know where they are. I think they're right behind this camera, and I can't get them. So anyway, it was called Politically Incoherent. We released it in around Labor Day in October of 2013. It went to #1 on the Amazon comedy chart, stayed there for almost a month.
Wow.
We debuted at #3 on Billboard's comedy charts. And it was also #1 on iTunes for a brief period.
That's fantastic.
So I took screenshots of all those surveys and sent them to the guys that were in my band back in Raleigh, a couple of which were kind of right-wingers. And I said, hey, how's it feel to have a former band member who has a hit album?
That's great. I had no idea you had a hit album.
Yeah,
I had no idea you had an album.
Yeah, it was on Audio Fidelity Records. The guy who's the head of that, Marshall Blonstein, is the cousin of Lou Adler.
Oh, really?
So he was literally in the room when Cheech and Chong wrote Dave's Not Here.
Oh, wow.
So he has that kind of background, and he was shepherding me through this process. And I would say, well, here's an idea I had for something. And he would say, well, when I was working with Cheech and Chong, I was like, don't say that, okay? I mean, that's pretty fucking intimidating.
And for anybody who doesn't know who Lou Adler was, I'll just say 3 words.
He's still with us.
Is he? Okay. Yeah. Well, he was Rocky Horror Show.
Oh, well, no, he produced the Mamas and the Papas. Carole King.
But for me, he produced Rocky Horror Show on Broadway, and I'm one of the few people who saw the original production.
Yeah, you're a Broadway guy, so
exactly.
Not on my radar at all. But he was a record rep for Columbia Records in 1967. So he was literally out there selling all the records that I was listening to as a teenager growing up. So the man is really fascinating to listen to his stories and everything. And it was really a very enjoyable process putting it
Oh, I
together.
can imagine.
And you know, it was myself and 24 other people put this thing together. So I had actors and voice actors and singers, obviously Marion Ann Arbor and Audrey Minneapolis. We
Right.
had, you know, all these people chipping in, and everybody got a piece of it when we were done. And so this next one we're going to do, I'm hoping to get it out in the same time period, say like September. Is going to have a lot of the same people on it. Richard Hensel in Chicago,
Right.
Jeff Hoyt and his troupe up in Seattle, and we've already started working on it. I have a lot of it in the can, and hopefully we'll do it again.
I should mention, by the way, for the people who don't know who Richard Hensel is, if you like the movie Groundhog Day, and who doesn't, Richard Hensel is one of the radio voices you hear every single day. It's cold out there.
Yeah, he got a chance to reprise that role for the Super Bowl ad that Jeep Cherokee, I believe it was Jeep Cherokee, ran with Bill Murray, and ran this year. So he got to come back to that. And Richard's just a fantastic actor. He's been doing Mark Twain ever since he was a teenager.
Wow.
So he appears on stage frequently and does one-man Mark Twain shows. And he does obviously a lot of voice acting and everything. He's got just a great dramatic voice, and
yeah, he does.
Super guy. He's really fun to work with. He's crazy, and I love it. So
well, yeah, crazy is a prerequisite, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know a lot of people know your music or your parodies and jingles, but they don't know that. I mean, you've been playing since you were what, 6?
Yeah, I took accordion lessons when I was 6 years old, because in those days
that's so sad.
It was all the rage. It really was. I don't know, people don't know that, but that was kind of a thing back then.
Wait a minute, you're a year older than me. In what universe was accordion lessons cool?
No, it was. I mean, the whole Lawrence Welk thing. He was big back then, and that
with my grandmother, he was.
Well, yeah, but your grandmother then was in her 30s, So
yeah, no. And the lovely Lemon Sister's gonna sing for you.
But I mean, okay. Joking aside, though, it was an introduction into learning to play the keyboard. And my sister and I both took lessons from the woman that gave keyboard lessons to Leon Russell.
Wow.
I took my accordion lessons from that woman, and I took my first guitar lesson from a guy whose band opened for the Doors. So I'm real happy to have that kind of like.
Oh, okay, yeah, you just got your creds in there real well.
Yeah.
And how many instruments do you play?
I don't. First of all, I'm not a performer, so I just plunk a little bit on the keyboards, and I've been playing guitar since I was 11. And I also play tenor sax and some harmonica and mandolin sometimes.
Bass.
Well, yeah, bass.
I know. If you play the guitar, you can play the bass. That's generally the thinking.
I mean, I have this bass simply for laying down tracks, and I can get a bass sound out of this, but it's not the same.
I know. I have my bass is a viola bass that I saw in the window of this music store. I used to live next door in Jersey City to a music store where the guy who owned it, Mark, he rebuilt instruments for all these major rock acts like Randy Bachman and tons of people. And he one day hung this viola bass in the window. So of course I'm passing it every day because his door is next to the entrance to my apartment. And I grew up, I'm a Beatle fanatic, and there's a viola bass. So of course I had to buy it. And that's
nice. Well,
I love it.
That's more of a pedigree than what I've got. I don't have any, like my Les Paul is an Epiphone, and
so's mine.
And this guitar here looks like a Martin, but it's really a Takamine. It's called the lawsuit guitar because Martin successfully sued these guys for putting this guitar out. It looks
Well,
that much like a Martin.
no shame on the Epiphone Les Paul. My Les Paul is an Epiphone. It's
Sounds great.
it's
I
the
used to have
same company.
a real American Strat when I played in the band, and I sold it, and later on got this Epiphone Les Paul, and I think it's got better tone, and I bought it for less than half the price.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. I mean, when I started out as a kid, my first drum set was a Ludwig, all wood, um, which they don't even make that anymore.
Yeah.
And I cry when I think about the things that I've given away over the years. I had a Gibson EBO bass, and God, how many Fender guitars.
That sounds like a musician.
Yeah, and my musician friends would argue the point, but
It becomes your ATM in hard times.
and it was, but boy, I think about that and I just start crying. It's horrible. Um, so I've been recollecting and trying to get it back together. And my wife, who is a singer, has taken the keyboard upstairs so she can practice. But it's
Yeah, when we were growing up, we had a piano in the living room, but it was never tuned properly. It was always a half a step flat. So I could never play along in the right key with the records. I'd have to turn off the record and then sit there and play it in the wrong key.
I understand that so
and for
well.
some songs, that was problematic because sometimes they would be in a weird key, and so anyway, I can't. My folks never sprung for the $30 it would cost in those days to tune a piano.
Wow, $30. Jeez, can you imagine?
Yeah,
What I have no idea what a piano tuner costs these days.
I imagine it's about a couple of hundred,
Yeah,
$200.
I would think so. But okay, so you're playing basically most of your life. How did you end up getting into the parodies?
When I was a kid, my best friend growing up his dad had a little woolen sack tape recorder, and we started making parodies. I remember when I was like 12, and I remember doing one in college, and when I was in college radio and KVRO in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which was the breeding ground for a lot of big talent. I don't know if you know, you're probably not familiar with the Chicago TV market, but
I lived in Chicago for 4 years.
Okay. Well, we had a guy that ended up going to Chicago TV, and we had a couple of people that ended up being Steve Goddard is from there. He was a big guy in Arizona. See, he's been on at Phoenix.
I recognize the name, but I don't.
And my friend Jeff Hoyt, who appears on some of these things, who does a lot of voice work. We were friends there at that radio station, and we were very much plugged into the LA and Chicago radio scenes there. I'm talking
Right.
like 1973, 74, 75. And so we would listen to those guys. We would listen to their air checks and try to emulate them. And we had a for a college radio station, very sophisticated format that played not only singles, but we played some of the album cuts too. And we had a great music director who turned me on to Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, Little Feat, a lot of acts that I probably would not otherwise have known about had I not worked at that radio station. So it was a great experience, and those are my lifelong friends, the people from the college radio days.
That's really cool. Trivia note: my friend who I grew up with, Michael O'Keefe, was Bonnie Raitt's husband at one time.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a small world.
Yeah, when her Streetlights album came out, that was when the light went on for me with her. Like, oh my God, this is something. And again, we played, Genesis, and we at night we would go sort of totally freeform and would become more album rock than during the daytime. And at the time, I didn't appreciate that so much, even though I had listened to album rock when I was younger. But my focus then was to be this top 40 disc jockey guy, and so I wanted songs that were like the Temptations and the Four Tops and Captain and Tennille and
Okay,
whatever.
you had me until you said Captain and
Well,
Tennille.
it's all pop music, and you can make fun of that, but I going back and doing these parodies has given me a new appreciation for what it took to produce a pop record.
Yeah,
No matter who the talent was,
absolutely.
because that really is an art form. Knowing the proper instrumentation and the mix and all that stuff. When you begin to reverse engineer these records, you begin to see the little nuances that went into things that made us respond to them as a hit record. And so, yeah, that's not something I would sit around and listen to, but it's something that it was my bread and butter. It was the stuff I used to make my product.
Hey, listen, I think it's great. Because anything in the entertainment industry, any aspect of it, is, if you can do it, it's miraculous. But you got out of it for a long time too, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, radio as a way to make a living is problematic.
Yeah, just listen to Harry Chapin.
If you're, well, that song WOLD came out right when I was starting. And
Oh God.
that was kind of good, because it was this little thing in the back of your head all the time. Like, if you're still doing this when you're 30, then, maybe you might want to. And I always had in my head, and I always had this expectation when I was younger, because I grew up a big NASA space freak. And I always thought, just from the drilling into my head, my parents, that I would end up being an engineer. And that's what I would do with my life. And when I found myself basically in the circus, which is what radio is, especially medium market radio, where everybody's moving around all of the time, and nobody's really making a lot of money, and people do it just for love of doing it. At a certain point, I realized, well, I might have been fascinated with this a few years ago, but it's really kind of a drag now, and it's the same old thing over and over again. And I'm not, I couldn't rely on a job being there from year to year. So my plan was go back to college, get a degree in something that had some stability and a future. And then my dream at that time was to start a recording studio, and start making commercials. And that's what I wanted to do, was actually produce commercials. My friend Jeff, and along with Brent Walker, where I was in Little Rock, Arkansas at that time, and they had broken off from the on-air thing to make ads that were very creative, and they were winning awards all over the place. And I really thought, hey, this is what I want to do. And by the time I got out of college, I had so gotten sucked into the computer side of things that I really didn't necessarily want to do that anymore. And at the same time, I got a job with American Airlines. So I got to fly for free all over the country, and I took up photography, and that distracted me and got me into this. So I was kind of away from music until I had gone through most of that. In 2004, I finally bought a guitar again, and finally learned how to record digitally. And so it was only a matter of time between that and doing the song parodies. And the one thing that was missing in that was an outlet. And here at that same time comes, the Stephanie Miller Show.
I was going to ask. There you go.
I tuned it in. I was living in Raleigh, and I was working in Durham, and the Chapel Hill radio station would cover Al Franken, which I was listening to already by then, because I'd read all his books and everything, and I was a big fan. And one day I had to go to the doctor's office, and I go out and get in my car and turn it on. It's still tuned to the Chapel Hill station, and here's this thing. And I'm sitting there in the parking lot listening to Steph and Jim Ward and Chris, and I'm like, what is this? This is really good. This is really something. Why didn't anybody tell me about this?
I found her on Air America.
Well, she wasn't ever on Air America.
Yeah, but all the people who were on Air America were fans of hers.
Yeah.
And that's how I got turned to her in the early Bush years.
Yeah, she famously was not part of the Air America thing. And as a result, when Air America tanked, Stephanie had already found a way to do this on her own. And she survived when they crashed and burned.
Yeah, because we lost Randy Rhoads for a while. We lost Franken. Well,
And
we've
that's how
lost
I
Franken
first
several
became
times.
aware of Rachel Maddow and
Exactly.
Mark Moran, the whole thing.
Oh, Mark
Maron, I'm sorry.
Maron is Maron is a great
I
cop.
used to say Moran, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Those guys, I would tape them. They just made me laugh every morning, and I thought it was hysterical.
Okay, so about what year did you? I mean, how did you contact Steph and company?
I started listening that would have been like the middle of 2006, I guess, when I first became aware of them. And I guess I'm not sure at what time I really became sort of a regular listener. But I sent my first little thing to them in April of 2007. And that was a parody of Brain Damage by Pink Floyd. And it was a lying sack of crap version. It was you're a lying sack of crap, so the lunatic is in your head.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I've heard that one.
And it was for Karl Rove. It was Karl Rove's A Lying Sack of Crap, and so I sent it to him, and the next day they played it, and I was like, oh my god, this is cool. They played my thing, and I played all the instruments and everything on that, and it was this really short thing. Then it just kind of ballooned. I think it really took off in the primary leading up to the 2012 election. That's when you had Michelle Bachmann and all those crazies and Herman Cain and all that.
Oh God!
So there was plenty of stuff to work with. And then when I moved to Colorado, not having any friends or anything up there, that's when Mary and I first started working together. I was cranking out stuff like every day, and I was spending all of my waking hours on things. I would spend a week on a bit sometimes. Really put a lot into it.
How did you find Mary? Because she's wonderful.
Just through the show. It might have been. I think it might have been one of the chat rooms or something like that. She said I can sing, and so we just got in touch with each other, and which was a godsend for me because I had really. When I was living in Raleigh, I did manage to find a couple of people here and there locally who would sing from time to time, but this thing is so demanding. It's like I can think of an idea at 4:00 in the afternoon, and Mary and I are working on it by 7, and we have it in the can by 9 or 10.
That's pretty amazing.
And most people can't do that.
No, I know you don't think of yourself as a singer particularly, but you do harmonize. So
yeah, and I, having been in a band, that kind of took me out of my shell as far as the last thing I would ever do when I was growing up was sing. I was never in choir or anything like that. But when you're in a band, you're kind of forced to, because they need anybody who can remotely sing to at least do backups. It really makes all the difference in the world. And so I found a lot of guys who I didn't think were necessarily great singers were kind of rising to that occasion, and I realized, well, if they can do that, I can too. And so
hey, listen, if Randy Bachman can do backup vocals and harmonize with Burton Cummings, anybody can.
Yeah, so it was just there's many times I would love to have some male singer that I could say, hey, can you do this? And I found that even guys who have good pipes and everything don't necessarily know how to do the expression, or in some cases flat just can't hit the pitch or whatever, and mostly though it's the expression. You're trying to emulate the feel of the original,
right?
If you can, or at least you could do that, or you could do like an Al Franken or a Weird Al, and just don't try to sound like the original, but just sort of make fun of your own squeaky voice. And on some songs, I will actually do that. But I've run into a lot of singers who just don't know how to sing for a recording. It's totally different than doing a live performance.
I vaguely remember.
Well, and I think the radio thing helped a lot, because when you're on the radio, and I used to say this a lot, disc jockeys hear the songs more times than the actual artists do. You
Yeah,
know, the
well,
artists, if you think about it, they'll go in, they'll rehearse it, and they'll record it, and then they'll do it live, you know, and maybe they sing it around the house, but I doubt it. But when you're a disc jockey, you have to listen to that friggin' song, you know, a couple of times a day, every day, 6 days a week for 10 years, you know, so you knew every little nuance of that record. And I think for me, that's really turned out to be something I could use to my advantage when we're doing these things, is to find those little tricks and stuff that most people don't think about.
well, it's certainly working for you because, I mean, everybody goes nuts every time one of your new parodies comes up on Steph's show. Um,
Yeah, it's a fun. You know, the thing about it is nostalgia is a drug, and that's what it is. You know, I'm tugging at that. I found so many times where I'll do what I consider to be a great song with funny lyrics on a song that wasn't that popular, and it just lays there. But then I'll do a so-so rendition of something that was a number one record, and everybody goes nuts for it.
because they know the tune.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's familiarity. I know. Um, I did you start doing jingles for the callers? Was that your idea, or did somebody on the show come up with that and ask you to do it?
I honestly don't remember, and I don't even remember what the first one was I did. I think I have. Obviously, since then, people have asked for it, um, but I think it was. I think it was my idea. The first few ones, anyway.
I mean, I love the Rockville Sioux one. That's
Yeah,
just perfect.
yeah. It's kind of obvious. Run around Sue, Rockville Sue.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so fitting if you know Sue. It's
Well, actually, that was the second one I
perfect.
did for her. The first one was a boy named Sue, and it really wasn't. It wasn't even me. It was just I just sent the Johnny Cash clip to them, and they used it.
Oh, that's funny. That's
By the way, people don't know this, but when I send things to the show, they never respond to me. They never send me back, oh, okay, thanks, we'll use this or whatever. I never know.
until you hear it on air.
I never know what they're doing. I'm not in the loop at all. Even when I was on their payroll, they didn't ever tell me what was going on. So,
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Steph coming down from the bedroom and she's late for the show.
yeah. Well,
She's
I mean, I don't
trying
want
to
to
stay on
speculate.
top of
I
it.
don't want to speculate into the inner workings of that particular production, because, but you know, I think it is true what they say. It's kind of in many cases, it's a dog and pony show. They don't know what they're doing from one minute to the next. But that being said, you cannot do a show like that without hours and hours of prep. And hats off to Travis for
Yeah.
doing a lot of that work. You can't fill 3 hours of talk radio programming by accident. And you also can't do it to the degree of talent and interest that they do it without Stephanie. She's got this incredible timing, incredible mind that allows her to key in on things and make things funny and light, and at the same time serious when it's necessary. And it's just it's an art form that she has mastered, and there's nothing else like it in all of media.
No, I agree. I think I think the show is amazing, and I'm glad Chris is back. I'm glad Travis is back. I
I never
miss.
thought I was really when Chris came back. I was shocked. I was like, I never thought that would happen.
Yeah, no, because he was coming back for like 2 3 days before they announced that he was actually coming back, and it was
Yeah,
like, the family's coming back together. All we
but
need
you
is
know, I
Jim.
very much could identify with him when he left, because when I left radio, it was almost like it was for me. It was like a survival thing. I did not want to spend my entire life doing this. You know, I didn't want this to be the only thing I ever knew. I wanted to go out and be around real people and do real things and have a real job, and you know, to do something like software engineering. You know, it's like you're building a house. You're taking a foundation, you're building on top of that, and you're doing every day. You're doing something a little different, even though for most people that, oh my God, you're just sitting behind a keyboard all day, but you're actually using your mind to create something that you're building on what you did the day before, and you're always learning new things. But to me, radio was the same thing over and over. It's like, you've got this much time, you've got to fill it with something. And in my case, I did music radio, which is boring as hell. You know, you're part of it is like, hit the next record and read this card, and you know, plug the products and plug whatever promotion we're doing, and you know, try to fill this role of being this music guy. Now, you know, it was enjoyable, but it was pretty much the same thing every day for 10 years. So I was ready for something new. So when Chris left, I knew I could identify with that idea, not only of let's do something else with our lives, but also that, you know, the challenge of it, and also the idea of working with other people more, and just sort of getting out there and seeing what you're capable of doing outside of a radio station. Right. And I very much could identify with that.
It's really funny because I listen to classic rock, or the classic rock on Sirius of classic vinyl, and what I really find hysterically funny is so many of the New York DJs who I grew up with, you know, on WNEW, which was the first of the big album rock stations, are all still going. They're on Sirius. Cousin Bruce Morrow, who I used to listen to with my little Japanese transistor under my pillow.
Yeah,
he's got to be 100 years old and he's still on.
I live in Asheboro, North Carolina, 20,000 people. It's a hugely red county. But one of the things I did when I moved here a year ago was, and I do this wherever I go, is I join a bowling league. I know it sounds dorky, but I'm really into making that ball move a certain way. You know, there's an art to it. And there was this woman on my team who grew up in, I believe it was Jersey, listening to Cousin Brucey. She was a couple of years older than me, a couple of years older than us, and that's how we bonded. You know, I would show her Cousin Brucey ads and turn her on. So I still will text her and send her recording, you know, air checks of Cousin Brucey, and also the WNEW guys and the good guys, the whole New York radio scene. I personally was never that much into New York radio. I always thought Chicago and LA were stronger. Sorry.
Well, being a New Yorker, you know, I'm loyal to my own.
I always thought New York radio was a bit of the style of doing it was more of a throwback. Like, they never really adopted sort of the LA sound that everybody else did. And that's a very general statement. But I always thought that a lot of the ones that were sort of the top New York guys, to me anyway, I did not think they were as creative as John Landecker at WLS, or Robert W. Morgan at KHJ.
I know Robert W. Morgan. I remember him.
Yeah. I always thought those guys, and the exception to that might have been Imus, back before he became a racist douchebag on the radio.
When he was actually funny.
Yeah. I would say he was probably the exception to that. He seemed to put more into it than those guys did. And again, I'm being very general. I'm probably not being fair to, you know, whoever was in New York and really doing very creative stuff. I just never heard any of it, you know? Yeah.
Well, NEW had some really good people. Scott Muni and,
yeah. He's great.
He was
great voice.
Yeah, he really was. When I was my freshman year of high school, Scott Mooney came to my high school to introduce a band that was playing, and for some reason I am blanking on their name, but they had a young 16-year-old lead guitarist named Peter Frampton. It was Humble Pie.
Humble Pie, yeah.
Yeah. So
Humble Pie referenced in the movie Rancho Deluxe with Jeff Bridges.
Well done.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it. And we were really lucky. I mean, we had Livingston Taylor, and of course everybody shouting out, "Do Fire and Rain."
You know, I don't know if you know the movie Almost Famous.
I love that movie.
Peter Frampton plays Humble Pie's road manager in the movie. So,
I don't think I realized that. I love that
yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah, that was.
That was the first
The,
movie that I took my girlfriend. I've been with my girlfriend for 20 years, and that was the first movie I took her and her kids to see, because it's a coming of age film, and that was the day, literally the day I met those kids, and now they're all, you know, married with kids of their own and everything.
yeah, well, we're getting older. That's the way